Thank you very much for your patience. So now we are going to start almost the second to last activity for this afternoon. We're going to be talking about biodiversity and ecosystem valuation. So please let's welcome with an applause to our panelists, please. And an applause for you as well, because you're with a lot of energy still for last event here. So please, Marianne, let's start.
Buenas tardes a todas y todos y bienvenidos a este último panel de nuestro evento. My name is Marianne Kettunen and I'm a senior policy expert and advisor with the Trade Development and the Environment Hub, the Trade Hub for short, in the UK. And I'm also one of the GDN mentors as well. Of course, it's a great pleasure to be here with you in Quito. So thank you so much, GDN, for inviting me to be part of this. Before we dive into this final plenary session, I'm going to use my chair's role very briefly to set the scene for what we are about to be hearing today, and also what we hope to do at the end of our panel presentations and insights. So very appropriately for a final panel of the event, this panel is about scaling up biodiversity mainstreaming and also ecosystem valuation. Now, I admit that when I first saw the title, I had to take a pause and think about it. So what does it actually mean when we talk about scaling up streaming? After having thought about it for a moment, I thought, okay, mainstreaming. What we mean by that is making biodiversity integral across different sectors. So we're looking at biodiversity across different sectors, including the policies that are governing those sectors among the different sectoral actors, and also, of course, the activities happening on the ground with the sectors. So to me, that is what mainstreaming is about. But of course, mainstreaming can happen and still remain quite small scale. And that's why we need also to scale up. So for example, we need to scale up good practice projects on the ground, which have been mainstream, but perhaps haven't really been delivering yet at the right scale, so that these good practices do become the norm at national, regional, and even global level. So in my mind, that is what this session is about. It invites us, it challenges us to really think about these two different elements together. And it also invites us to think about how we can use the economic valuation, and not only valuation in monetary terms, but also much more broadly valuation of biodiversity to mainstream and to scale up. That's in our title. We have an excellent panel with us here in Quito and also online today to help to get some insights on this. We have international organizations to academia and to NGOs represented here. We will be talking about challenges, but we will be also trying to talk about solutions. And in terms of solutions, we'll be looking at the role of indigenous knowledge, interdisciplinary research, and also capacity building, which are very much in the core of the GDN and have also been in the core of the discussions during these 2 days. So without any further ado, I'd like to invite our first speaker panelist, Gabriel Quijanria, who is the Regional Director of South America at IUCN. And of course, IUCN stands for the International Union for Conservation of Nature. So Gabriel, the floor is yours. Help to set the scene with the mainstreaming and what do you think the mainstreaming means? Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne, and thank you very much, GDN, for the invitation to join you here. It's a pleasure for us to be present. For me personally, it's something important because I'm coming back to discussions I had 30 years ago when I used to be a researcher. and not a desk environmentalist as I am now, or I has been for quite some time in my professional life. But it is interesting to discuss or to talk about mainstreaming, because it's something that all of us are convinced that is extremely needed, but as usual, it's easier to say it than to do it. And for the point of view of someone like me that has been a practitioner and a policy maker for the last 20 years, I've been directly involved in trying to mainstream the environment or biodiversity in public policies, working from Ministry of the Environment in my home country in Peru, and now from my UCN, trying to do the same at the regional level, working in South America. And so let's go back to the basics. What mainstreaming means. And here's a definition that has been produced by IUCN and BirdLife together in the context of a project that was trying to get some information on real practices. The exact name of this project is Mainstreaming Biodiversity, how the success would look like. So the idea of this proposal, of this intervention, was to show how mainstreaming may look in terms of a successful experience on the ground, in different contexts, applied to different sectors, to different realities. And something that it's interesting here is this possibility of working at different levels. What is it? Because you can do mainstreaming at very different levels. You can work at a national or global, let's say global public policy or whole public policy level, that it's maybe at the level of the National Development Plan, or certain instruments that are legal instruments or regulatory instruments that are trying to change the way development is done or is promoted in a specific country. So, or you can do it sector by sector, that trying to identify where the main points or the critical points are regarding regarding the pressure that biodiversity is suffering from a specific activity, from a specific happening in a sector, or where are the opportunities for higher participation or a higher role for biodiversity in terms of the opportunities of that sector, namely this whole discussion about bioeconomy and the possibility of generating new products and new economic opportunities around the sustainable use of biodiversity, for instance. Or you can do it at a project level. You can do it based in terms of a specific intervention happening in a specific sector, in a specific geographical area, and then it is critical to have also not only this discussion, let's say strategic discussion happening in terms of how to adapt the regulation and how to adapt the plans and to include the specific mentions to biodiversity, but also tools, how the budgets recognize or mainstream biodiversity, how other instruments that happen around the intervention itself also incorporate this approach in terms of biodiversity at the intervention level. And that is something very, very challenging, because when you take this, I don't know, a proposal to a cabinet of decision makers in the public sector, for instance, the narrative in terms of biodiversity, no one can go against it. They will say, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, let's do it. But the problem will come when you try to make that operational and say, well, you have to devote some part of your budget to go straight to this new approach, and then problems will start when you have to deal with the rigidities that happen, for instance, in the public sector. When I work at the Ministry of Environment, for instance, we had these discussions with the Ministry of Finance in terms of climate change adaptation, and how the budget for public investment had to be reviewed and had to be thought in a completely different way, saying don't put so much too much money in the initial investment, but put more money in terms of the maintenance of certain infrastructure, because of climate change, you are going to have a different pattern than the one you used to have before. But those discussions that you might say, no, those are the technical ones and those are the rational ones, they are not. They are very, very charged in terms of the emotion that the officers in the different ministries or in the different offices have put in the development of their tools, of their instruments. And they say, no, this is perfect. Why are you coming now trying to say that this thing that took us, I don't know, 10 years to develop now needs to be reviewed and needs to take in account something that we didn't see at that time, and that it's something that is challenging. So there is always the need to have this openness to work in, I don't like this term, but work outside your comfort zone, and how can you put in the shoes of the other person and understand where these instruments or these views come from, and how can they accommodate these new views in terms of biodiversity mainstreaming, or biodiversity, or climate change, or whatever new term might come. This is an experience that we are starting to implement in its second phase. It has worked in many countries, many in Africa, Guyana, here in South America, with a sectoral view or a sectoral level approach in terms of how to mainstream the biodiversity view in terms of the planning and the decision making in these processes. In the case of Guyana, we have worked with the forestry sector, and well, there is a discussion for the second phase in terms of the potential of taking all these also to the oil sector. I don't know if all of you are aware of what's going on there in Guyana and Suriname. They have discovered these huge oil deposits, offshore oil deposits, and they have already started to develop them. So there is the need to have this green growth or green growth mainstreaming in terms of how can this country take advantage of this opportunity that has arisen and has a very small window of opportunity because of the discussions around climate change will make this oil acceptable very soon. So how can these countries take advantage of this and use the revenue that will happen because they will develop this oil? How this revenue can be the one leading the transformation of the country, of the economy, in terms of a green path, in terms of generating the opportunities to have a greener economy, an economy with a much less impact in terms of biodiversity. In the case of countries that still have 90 to 93% of their forest cover still standing, that they don't have too much people to deal with, around 1.5 million between the two countries, between Suriname and Guyana. So this is an opportunity to build a new model showing that biodiversity mainstreaming or the whole sustainability mainstreaming can be done in terms at a scale, transforming a country. We are betting on this, on the possibility of being able to join this process and to advise this process. We hope this is something that will work. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gabriel. Some key points that I take on your presentation in summary would be that there are many entry points to mainstreaming. There's many levels, many entry points to it. You also have to be very mindful of the window of opportunity. So identifying where's the window of opportunity, and that might close relatively shortly, as we heard as well. And the final point as well that I took from you was that there is a need for the evidence, and the burden of evidence is often on our shoulders to show why this is beneficial. And also what you said, sometimes it can get emotional. So I think, perhaps a fair summary for the framework we're dealing with mainstreaming. But thank you for that. We move on from the framework and thinking of mainstreaming to something, looking at it more in concrete terms, in practice. So I would like to invite Luciano Andriamaro, Director of the Science and Knowledge Department at the Conservation International Madagascar, to take the floor and give us some insights from her work. Not yours, no. Yeah, not.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to DJN to invite me among the panelists today. I am addressing 3 main questions for the topic for this last plenary session today. I am taking some example because, as Marianne said, I am from Conservation International Madagascar, so I am taking some example from our country in Madagascar. First of all, as I said, I have 3 questions. The first question is why it is challenging to mainstream biodiversity to the development, mainly for the low and medium income countries. For that question, communication is very interesting because this morning I heard that biodiversity is not really clear for the investors. So I think that the value, the monetary value of biodiversity and ecosystem services is not yet well demonstrated because of lack of research, tools, approaches on having the evidence. It is difficult to vehicle the message resulting from research to local communities and decision makers. We talked about science to policy also yesterday. So importance of communication approach is a key on bearing in mind the understanding and level of education of different target people. How can they master that there are hotspots for biodiversity and a lot of funding is spent to protect threatened species instead to their subsistence activities? Understand this action is still utopic for them. Obtaining the ownership of local people living close and surrounding the forest, the ocean, and the freshwater is needed to defend the trade-offs and to argue about the benefit for biodiversity conservation. For the last decade, Madagascar has extended the protected areas 3 times the size in 2003, and in 2017, another commitment to triple the marine protected areas. Most of the protected areas are under the category 5 and 6 of IUCN to strengthen the involvement of local communities to the management of protected area. Until now, we still intensify the sensitization and the communication for maintaining the commitment of all stakeholders composed by the multi-sectoral actors from local to national level. Also, sharing a best practice, the message should come from the local communities to the decision makers. We talked more about bottom-up approach. The communities are trying to design communication tools and channels for ensuring that the key messages reach to the target people. So the message for this first question is wherever we are and whoever we are, we benefit from the goodness of nature. Let's move to the second question. For the second question, can mainstreaming biodiversity and ecosystem services alleviate poverty? Most people living in rural and remote areas are conscious and aware of the importance of ecosystem services in which they depend on and the impact of global change in their daily life. For example, the case of services provided by the watershed as a water supply, farming, transport, energy, and so on. Due to poverty, the sustainability is not anchored in their mind anymore because they don't have any alternative to the overexploitation of the natural resource to ensure their survival. The establishment of different tools as land use planning or marine spatial planning for intersectoral involvement and active participation of local communities and the local authorities as well would be the best solution. The development of different concepts as NPS, nature-based solution, ecosystem-based adaptation, green-gray infrastructure, biodiversity offset, green-blue jobs, One Health, payment for ecosystem services as one should be accompanied by the capacity, a lot of capacity building at each level. A recent study made by the Protected Area and Biodiversity Foundation in Madagascar on the valuation of the economic benefit of protected areas in Madagascar shows that the economic contribution of the protected areas for the country in general is around $50 per hectare per year. It is $66 per hectare per year for the well-being of local communities, and again $60 per hectare per year for key economic sectors as water, energy, tourism, agriculture, fisheries, and environment. At global level, the protected areas in Madagascar contribute to the carbon stockage at $1,100 per hectare per year. So, multi-sectoral approach and multidisciplinary research to ensure the integration of biodiversity and ecosystem services to the sector, to the sector strategies and policies. The case of the establishment of the Marine Spatial Planning in Madagascar, in which the Ministry of Territory Management led the process, and the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Fisheries and Blue Economy are the main contributor. Furthermore, the other ministries involved, as the Ministry of Transport, Ministry of Meteorology, Ministry of Trade, Ministry of Strategic Resource, in charge of oil and gas. So the main message for this second question is protection costs less than the service provided by the nature. Regeneration is possible in some cases, but in general, natural resources are tearing. For the last question, how far the scaling up can reach. At the country level, mainstreaming biodiversity and ecosystem services is critical for sustainable development on considering the value of natural capital, critical natural capital, into the general accounting. Example, the program WAVES developed by Madagascar, WAVES, Wealth Accounting and Valuation of Ecosystem Services, implemented in Madagascar on establishing the satellite accounts for various ecosystem services. All intersectoral policies should take into account the green and blue values, and the implementers are evaluated to their commitment to the sustainability of natural resources that they used. Their capacity, capacity of the government, the private sectors, the civil societies, academics, as one, should be strengthened on the existing strategies and policies related to the sustainable management of biodiversity and NCPs, the nature contribution to people. So how to calculate and integrate the value of this capital and the service that it provides into economic and financial strategies, and in particular into resource allocation, budgetary, fiscal, monetary, and monetary policies. Again, recent document called the White Book, produced by the Protected Area and Biodiversity Foundation in Madagascar, on evaluation of economic benefit of protected areas in Madagascar, and recently, 1 month ago, the one for the marine protected areas is produced. In one hand, these documents support on demonstrating to the local people their benefit if they protect the biodiversity and ecosystem services. In the other hand, to have a realistic amount needed to ensure the sustainability of the protected areas, facilitate the implementation of the access and benefit sharing, the ABS under the Nagoya Protocol, and to attract also the donor for funding. At Africa region, I don't know if you already heard about the Gaborone Declaration. It is for valuation of natural capital, and it was signed in 2012 by 19 countries, 19 Africa states. This declaration ensures that the contribution of natural capital to sustainable economic growth, the maintenance and the enhancement of social capital and human well-being are quantified and integrated to the development and the businesses practices. When we are on the transition from the Aichi target to the global biodiversity framework, my question is, did we reach one of the 20 previous goals? It is still a question to invite you to respond. The most important is on having the opportunity to implement the GBF through the National Biodiversity, the NBSAP, updated, considering the new concept. And it should be aligned with the priority of the country. So the last message is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Luciano. And while we get our next speaker, Sunetha, online, just to say quickly that what I heard from you was really the emphasis on the local communities, true and true. Also that there is a great information already available of the value of protected areas conservation in Madagascar. And the question I'm asking, obviously, is wondering how much that value is flowing towards the local communities to really make it their worthwhile to conserve. And I guess that's a big question in general. And I think you already touched upon that as well. So it was really interesting. Thank you so much. Sunetha, are you online with us?
Yes, I am, Marianne.
Super. So I will introduce you first. So we have online Sunetha Subramanian. She is a research fellow at the United Nations University and their Institute for the Advanced Study of Sustainability. So Sunetha, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marianne. And I will try and keep my promise to you that I will keep it within 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Very hearty greetings from Tokyo. It's very early here. I hope everyone's having a good time. I can see all of you are having a good time. It's a pity that I couldn't join. Yeah, it's been an incredible space to work with the GBM. So yeah, hopefully sometime we will again meet. Let me get straight into my presentation. If I can have the slides, please. So I keep to time, and maybe we will have some time for interaction later on. So I will be focusing again on the same topic, but more from multiple experiences around the world, but abstracting lessons that we picked up during certain analysis we've done in the course of it. If you don't have my slides.
Do you want us to share your slides, or do you want to share them?
Okay, we want, okay. Well, I thought it was going to be shared from your end, so
We can do it from here, I think. Can we share the slides from here? Tech support. Is there any? Can we share the slides? Can we share her slides from here?
yes, I can do it from my end. It's just that I made my slides a bit messy.
We're trying to get them up here.
Okay.
So we'll give you a sign when it's up.
Okay.
Right. Yes. Can you see it yourself?
Yeah, I can. Thank you.
So
Yes, thank you.
Let me know when we need to change them.
Yeah, you can move to the next. This is just the title of the panel itself. So it's like just highlighting what is it that we are trying to do here. We're looking at the persistent challenges that link to scaling up biodiversity mainstreaming and the role of interdisciplinary research, indigenous knowledge, and capacity building. Yeah.
Super.
So yeah, let's go on. Yeah, I'm good. Let's start from here. So the what I'd like to emphasize here is that we do know a lot. But there's a lot that we need to understand. All of this knowledge that we have, you know, from direct experiences, from various kinds of assessments that are being done, both in mainstream science and also across local communities and societal groups and citizens groups. Some of the there's a lot out there, but there's a need for us to pause, to digest and to understand what all of this implies. And some lessons that we do know and we should understand is that talking about mainstreaming biodiversity, and that's already been very well illustrated and highlighted by the speakers earlier, is that we need to look at more integrated approaches to using landscapes and seascapes, because all activities, from all the way from protection to different kinds of exploitation of resources, happen on terrestrial or aquatic and marine ecosystems. But it's important that this is done in an integrated fashion, because there are multiple sectors involved, multiple stakeholders involved, and of course different kinds of ecosystems involved, and with a lot of spillover effects between them. Now, these different scapes offer, they serve multiple functions, if you want to call them that, or the more nature contributions that they have to us as people. And these different functions are utilized, they are exploited by various for various uses. So it could be all from, in the typical ecosystem services lingo, it would be provisioning, cultural services, regulating services, or basically materials that we use, the ways that different natural cycles are regulated. So there are all of these functions that are there. All of these are leveraged, they're used for multiple uses, but this use is, it is defined by the priorities of different users. So there are multiple users with multiple uses of these ecosystems, and that is really the operative word, because we have so many users going all the way from indigenous peoples and local communities and various other social groups who are trying to meet the needs of various well-being needs. But then it also goes all the way to the priorities of, say, national governments, of conservation agencies, of intergovernment, of global priorities, and who gets to decide what is the action that is being taken on the landscape at the landscape level is a matter of right now it's pretty much determined by economic considerations, and of course a lot through is dependent also on who wields the power to decide. But when there's so much complexity with these interactions, what we also need to look at is how can we, and that's the whole solutions aspect, is to synergize and leverage the different resources that are existing, because that's the only way we can hope to have something, that higher, larger than the sum of the parts. So we've got financial, technical, human resources, and that goes back to knowledge, that goes back to different kinds of technologies that we could use, different kinds of innovative financing approaches we could use, that are scale appropriate, that are accessible to the different stakeholder groups, because we can't just say that there are solutions and people should be using the solutions. We should be working towards raising the comprehension about how these solutions can be used, what is available, how can they be used, how can they be accessed, is it cost effective, is it does it fall within what people's capacities are. And first, do people really have the capacity to understand how to go about doing something in an integrated fashion? It is much more easier at the we see at the level of implementation on the ground, where this complexity is much more embraced because it's not very sectoral in thinking, like food, health, tenure rights, all of this is actually entrenched at the local level. When we go into higher levels of planning, they become, the jurisdiction of different sectors. But then, therefore, there's a need to invest in raising awareness and building the capacities of decision makers to understand first how such integrated activities could actually be operationalized. And I'd just like to give a small example. So, for instance, like in Singapore, they have the cities in nature concept where they are trying to, so it's led by the Environment Ministry, and they are trying to they have been pushing for this big connectivity between the protected areas and the business district. And they actually made a mandate saying that every ward in a hospital should face a window that faces nature. And then once the whole One Health concept became much more popular, they started seeing that there's a lot more of work that they can do with their health sector, the health department, because what they're doing has huge co-benefits for the health of their population. So there are things, and now they're trying to do a lot more work together. Especially COVID enabled this, catalyzed this even faster. But the point is, they are now pooling resources, and that's a very welcome development. So any such planning activity we may think of it as a single sector, but its linkages to biodiversity, its linkages to multiple actor priorities should be well understood, well deliberated, and then put in and part of the design. Can I go to the next slide, please?
Yes, moving on.
And so the core principles really to keep in mind would be that conservation of biodiversity needs fostering and facilitating sustainable use and equity. So it's when we speak about conservation, in the Convention on Biological Diversity context, the objectives of the convention are conservation, sustainable use, and equity. But then we just can't. We have to work on the motivations of people. We do know that everyone's, that the resources are finite, that there are so many different kinds of interests, and so if we want people if you want to undertake conservation, so there's one part which is, of course, a whole protection or nature as nature aspect, but the larger world, where much of the good, where we want more desirable outcomes, is where people are managing these landscapes and seascapes. It's where production activities are happening, and we have to work on ensuring that that's happening in a sustainable fashion. So the focus on sustainable use, but also people are not going to feel more motivated or feel a sense of ownership and a sense of, taking ownership over this concept if it's not equitable, if they don't feel that they are being acknowledged and rewarded for their efforts. And so that's a core area that needs to be focused on. The second set of principles we need to keep in mind is investing, and it's good return on investment, is investing on deliberation and consensus building across the different types of stakeholders. It's easier said than done, and we all know that in various decision chains or of a landscape and seascape, there are power hierarchies, or conflicts, and all of that. We are all very well aware of this, but still it's a worthwhile effort, because at least we bring out all of the hidden issues. We bring out the marginalized stakeholders who usually just have to, as I think Luciana mentioned, the burdens are disproportionate to the efforts that have to be made at that level.
So Nita,
and it's important. 2 minutes do I have?
I think you have a bit less than 1 minute.
Yeah, and you can go to the last slide. You can go to the last slide.
Here we go.
All right. So compared to all, so when we speak about all of this, it means that there is no single pathway to get to what we are trying to achieve. We have to experiment, and because there are so many actors and so many priorities, but that also means we need to respect the various contexts within which we operate, and that requires us to have a more transdisciplinary approach, which means it's solution focused across multiple stakeholders, and we come up with we identify priorities. We bring on board different knowledge systems because it's all going to feed into different kinds of solutions, which helps us to build consensus for more inclusive approaches. And so ignoring the priorities of some stakeholders would continuously keep impeding our goals, our pathways towards achieving sustainability goals. We could do this more with engaging in peer learning and social learning activities, which is high active engagement of different stakeholders. Yeah, I'll pause here. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And your last slide with "there's no single pathway" really, I think, speaks to what Gabriel said at the very start. There's no single pathway. And thank you for bringing in the landscape and seascape approaches as well to really concrete means to look at mainstreaming. Sunita, thank you so much. Please stay online. Hopefully we maybe have some time for questions, depending on how much we can perhaps even run over time, a couple of minutes, but we will move on here in Quito. So bringing in our next speaker, who is Laila Sandroni. And Laila is Science, Technology and Policy Fellow at the Inter-American Institute for Global Change Research. And I think what we're going to be doing now is we're going to be starting to look at the role of research, and particularly interdisciplinary research, in doing mainstreaming. So moving from these valuation landscape approaches to the research role and how we can make that happen. And again, having the local communities, indigenous communities and knowledge in the core of this as well. So Laila, when it's ready, floor is yours.
So I think I have one challenge in mainstreaming biodiversity conservation today, which is nobody falls asleep in the room. So we now have to keep the energy going. I know it's the last plenary of the last day of 2 pretty intense days. And I hope that we can still have the energy to think about how the overlapping of the different speeches here can come together to produce a more connected perspective on how to mainstream biodiversity conservation. So first of all, I have to speak closer to the microphone. Okay, I will do it. So first of all, I'd like to introduce the institution that I work on, and to say to talk a little bit about how we work and what we do to try to mainstream biodiversity conservation in the Americas. So the Inter-American Institute for Global Change Research is an intergovernmental organization that was funded by the Declaration of Montevideo in 1992, and it brings together 19 member countries of the Americas to work around the values of scientific excellence, international cooperation, full and open exchange of scientific information relevant to global environmental change. So basically, we work upon scientific investigation and capacity building of researchers in the Americas to tackle the issues of global environmental change. And we do that by fostering collaborations among our scientists and also recognizing key areas and specific topics that we need to work deeper upon so we can develop more capacity in our continent. So we work upon a science agenda that was created collectively by the IAI Scientific Advisory Committee and the Science Policy Advisory Committee that issued key topics of global environmental change that should be addressed in the Americas. You can see them in your in the presentation there, but you can see that one of them is ecosystems, biodiversity, land use, cover, and water resources. So those aspects of global environmental change are tackled through a transdisciplinary perspective. So Sunita's speech was pretty well put on just before mine, because we really try to tackle those issues through this perspective. And we understand by transdisciplinary approach, the science that is needed when a problem is wicked. When you don't have one single pathway or one single solution to a problem, you have to bring together to the same table people with diverse perspectives on it, so you can create innovative solutions. So transdisciplinary research deals with these problems in a way that it can involve diverse areas of the scientific knowledge, but not just interdisciplinarity, it's transdisciplinarity. So it includes also non-academic knowledges, and it grasps the complexity of problems and links abstract to case-specific knowledges. We have been seeing a lot of this through the sessions here, how it is important to have global perspectives, but also keep connecting to on-the-ground activities, and develop solutions and actions that promote the common good. So it's not just research per se, it's not just participatory research that you go there and collect data from the communities, but also something that gives back to the communities that are being affected by those problems. So basically, we work on capacity building and research support. So these are some of the programs that the IAI has. I'm not getting into them. Please do access our website to learn more about them. But just to recognize there are many instances and places that we work upon. We have a transdisciplinary academy that works with capacity building and curriculums in transdisciplinary research. We have a virtual campus that we offer different courses and short courses, a little bit more long-term courses, all of them with certificates. We have the Science, Technology, and Policy Fellowship that I am a part of, and also Karina here in the audience is a part of. We have the Small Grants Program that offer small grants to science in Latin America. And we also have workshops of formation in different global environmental change topics. So why transdisciplinarity is important for biodiversity policy? So this is the reflection, the main reflection. I'm getting to my main point here now. So evidence-based decision-making is pretty well established in mainstream conservation policy. I mean, CI, TNC, IUCN, all WWF, they all work with pretty good amount of scientific data, mainly ecological data, but also social data around conservation issues. But then the science behind this decision-making is still basically ecological. And the social science side of it, which the GDN works upon, is not that really well in depth as the ecological knowledge is. And if you go to the use of local perspectives and indigenous knowledges, the gap is even worse. So how we can make this happen further without losing the ground that we gained with evidence-based conservation? Because it's not to say that evidence-based conservation is bad, but how do we enhance the science that is behind this evidence-based so it also incorporates other types of knowledge? So transdisciplinary science can be a bridge to that, and can be a bridge to reach the target 22 of the new global biodiversity framework to ensure full, equitable, inclusive, and effective gender responsive participation in conservation. So just to have this as a more grounded perspective, I wanted to offer one example of one of the projects that was funded by the Small Grants Program. So how much time do I have for that?
3 minutes.
Okay, 3 minutes to describe
you have enough
project.
time.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about the MapFire project. The MapFire, so all research that the IAI funds is transdisciplinary and transboundary. What that means is that the research is always developed at least in 3 countries in the Americas, and each of the teams in each of the countries has at least 1 social scientist, 1 natural scientist, and 1 non-academic stakeholder. So you can see that there is at least 9 people composing each of the research teams, and normally it's more like 15 to 20 people in each of the research teams, okay? So it's a pretty complex network of people to work with. And each of the programs that we have hosted finance more or less 6 to 7 projects. So they're not a lot of projects, but projects that encompass a relatively large network of people because they are in different places in the Americas, right? So this specific project was funded by the Small Grants Program on Human Well-being and Ecosystem Services. And it was led by the SEMADEM, which is a pretty strong research institute in Brazil, but encompassed also people in Peru and in Bolivia, and in the Amazon, working on fire. So what normally is the basic science behind working on fire and biodiversity and how they relate to each other? Basically, the SEMADEM normally works with geospatial data to recognize where the fire is and how it relates to the carbon footprint of those fires, what it means for the forest deforestation, and so on. This is the basic science behind this. This is like the normal mainstream biodiversity project. But then what is different about this project? They did this part of recognizing where the fires were in that years, recognizing the tendencies and why it was developed, but also they worked with the communities that were in that same territories in Peru, in Bolivia, and in Brazil to develop a guide on how to relate to fire and how to recognize ways of making it less likely to happen. So they have worked with those communities to develop the guide, and then they have distributed and made actions in the schools in these communities with the guide, so they could pass on the information that was co-created with the communities that were at the center stage of the project. So they produce this material that is available online. Everything that the IAI finances is open source, available, and not chargeable at all. So this material is also like that. And if you want, you can take a look at it. So this is just one concrete example on how the normal science can be done in a way that it makes it full cycle to go to the communities, be co-produced, and generate specific outcomes in a smaller scale that should be scaled up.
Precisely. Thank you, Laila, because obviously, please do take your seat. But, interesting question from here on is how to scale it up. Can we reach it to the regional, perhaps government to help to bring it up? But at least a very solid research is there, and that has been turned into practice as well. So thank you for that. Then our last panelist speaker, but certainly not the least, I would like to invite Jessica Pacheco, who is Forest and Freshwater Program Officer at the WWF Ecuador. So please, Jessica, take the floor. And knowing a little bit what she's going to talk about, I feel that this is a really interesting final talk, inspiring as well to show how research can lead to policy action and scaling things up at even a regional level. So, Jessica, the floor is yours.
Hola, buenas tardes con todos. Gracias por invitarme a esta plenaria y yo les voy a hablar sobre el trabajo que hacemos como WWF Ecuador en el programa de vida silvestre y agua dulce. El día de hoy les voy a hablar sobre un objetivo paraguas que tenemos en
umbrella spectrum that we have in common in some
de
countries in Latin America. And it's all about pink dolphins. Let me tell you about this project. I'm in charge of it. It's called Water for Nature, Water for People. So the goal of this project is to improve the health of freshwater ecosystems as well as people who depend on these freshwater systems. We seek to work in different lines of work, which hold, for example, the objectives of reducing contamination, freshwater systems, developing healthy systems for both the human populations and the animals and species, wildlife species, and also the protection of wetlands and water reserve areas. As you know, river dolphins are found everywhere in the world, but specifically in South America, we have two species specifically. One is pink dolphin, it's the most famous one. It's called Ignia or Boto in other countries. In other countries, it's called Donina, but it's called Ignia geofrensis. That geofrensis, that's the actual name. And we also have Takushi. Takushi is a gray dolphin, much more similar to the sea dolphin, but broadly speaking, these species are only found in freshwater systems. We have other dolphins in Asia, but we're going to focus on two Amazonian dolphins. As we were saying, these mammals are good indicators of the health of the ecosystems. They have a fundamental role in the trophic supply chain because they clean freshwater systems. They have several features that make them different species. Again, they have very special hydrodynamic and anatomic features. They feed on crab, fish, small turtles, and they're truly magical creatures because many of these dolphins can change their color. In fact, that makes it so that many of them, these dolphins have to face currently the textile industry, which is one of the second sources for contamination of freshwater systems. And that's where we have to have this interdisciplinary work between the different actions. That is, how do we make it so that public policy is done correctly for the preservation of these species, but not only for the preservation of the species as such, but also the ecosystems
de nosotros
people
mismos.
rely on them, i.e. ourselves. We are now in a period of a severe drought, and we're being heavily affected by them. This really illustrates how connected we are to these ecosystems. As we were saying before, river dolphins are exposed to several threats. One of these threats is the illegal traffic of their fins and other extremities. We're working hand in hand with the Ministry of Environment to reduce and mitigate these threats. Now, it was a topic that was not made visible because we didn't know what their parts looked like. Now we've obtained pictures, and you see them here. These are the teeth. This is a tooth from a pink dolphin, and they're sold in several fairs in Ecuador, and specifically closer to the borders. We as WWF in Ecuador believe that inclusive conservation is about working with local communities, but look at conservation as an economic opportunity on the territory. And this is why within Ramsar, Cuyabeno, Lagarto, Cocha, and Yasuni, you are looking for responsible development options to exploit the dolphin. That is, to generate economic activities based on the preservation of wildlife. We can't discuss conservation if the community is heavily involved in the trade and they have several solutions that they need for their communities. For example, health, which is intrinsically related to the freshwater ecosystems. Sorry, I can't go to the next one.
Bueno, entonces,
okay, so as we were saying, what we want to do as WWF in Ecuador is to do science for conservation, but also we also want to achieve a proper public management policy. So in the past days, we did a baseline study on the status of the pink dolphin populations. So you ask, how many pink dolphins do we have in Ecuador? Well, we held 6 scientific expeditions. We covered 1,500 kilometers on the rivers, 10 rivers, and we managed to see close to 300 pink dolphins. This is a very small population because this is the most distal population for the distribution of all pink dolphins in the South American region. Now, after the joint work that we've done with the INAVIO and the Ministry of Environment in Ecuador, we developed the first national database for river dolphins in Ecuador. This database will be made available at the website for the National Biodiversity Institutes. This invites to conservation. We are the first task force that openly shares scientific data for people to use for the generation of public policy. We have also developed research in accumulation of heavy metal studies from environmental standpoints in the first water basins in the country. This involves local communities and
Trabajamos también
policy. We're also working to integrate the fishing activities in Ecuador. You all know that we don't have legislation for fishing, and we have to approach this topic from a conservation standpoint so that we can apply it into a proper public policy. And finally, we wanted to tell you about how this could be scaled up to a global declaration for the conservation of Asian and South American pink dolphins. This took place last week. This is a source of pride for us. Ecuador participated and signed off on this declaration. It also reaffirms the commitment of the Ecuadorian government for the protection of the species, which, again, for many years was made invisible. We do this hand in hand with many other stakeholders, with local communities, with the youth organizations, with scientific institutions, people who are working with us on site, and very often we never see them. But I want to show you this picture of them. And finally, to tell you that this is a process that must be multidisciplinary in nature, and all stakeholders and all participants must join and band together and create a dynamic that allows us to raise awareness of the importance of conservation within each of our positions. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Jessica. And as said, it was an inspiring example of how to scale things up, which is a very nice note to end our part here. And we do have miraculously 10 minutes, even if we started late. So would love to really open the floor now to the audience. And as we've heard, mainstreaming can take many forms, need to take many forms, which does tell me that all of you must have something maybe to share or question or ask questions, but also please share your experiences as well. So the floor is really yours, at least for a couple of hands, if there are any. Hopefully there are some. Any takers? If not, obviously we have some questions here for ourselves, but it might be useful if we hear from the audience. I see one hand there at the center.
Muchas gracias a los panelistas, excelente las exposiciones. Fyodor Mena de Napo, Ecuador. Vengo en representación de la Universidad Regional Amazónica Iquia. Quería hacer una consulta a la señorita profesional de WWF respecto a que había un estudio donde se había detectado presencia de metales pesados en delfines en el Perú, y esto posiblemente estaba asociado a la minería metálica, sobre todo en la cuenca alta del río Napo y aguas abajo hacia el Amazonas. Quería que nos confirme esa información, por favor. ¿Qué tan riesgoso o qué tan grande es la amenaza que existe hacia los delfines por metales pesados como el mercurio en las cuencas hídricas de la Amazonía?
Bueno, muchas gracias por la pregunta. Y bueno, sí, en efecto, en muchos de los países sudamericanos ya existen en estos estudios, ¿no? Donde se ha tomado muestras de ADN de cada uno de especímenes de delfines de río, y en efecto se ha podido ver la bioacumulación de metales pesados. Realmente es una preocupación alarmante porque los delfines se alimentan en sí de peces, entonces esto va más allá, es un tema de cadena trófica, y a la larga también estos peces son alimento de las comunidades locales y también de nosotros, que a veces cuando vamos a la Amazonía nos comemos un maito, ¿no? Entonces está estrechamente relacionada a un tema de salud pública, y confirmo que sí, en efecto, hay este tema de que están las especies de mamíferos acuáticos bioacumulando metales pesados. Nosotros con la Universidad de las Américas también hicimos un estudio, el cual todavía se está llevando a cabo, pero también tenemos indicios de bioacumulación de metales pesados, principalmente en bagres, que son estos carroñeros de los ríos, ¿no? Entonces, sí hay una contaminación por estos indicios.
Gracias, Jessica. Further thoughts, questions? Front row or frontish row, and then also the back. So I have two questions. So first here in the front and then there at the back.
Gracias. Quizás con el ánimo de hacer un ejercicio práctico, pensar en esa experiencia que nos presenta WWF, cómo podría, digamos, una organización como IUCN quizás apoyar el escalamiento en la región amazónica. ¿Qué requeriría, qué tipos de apoyo requeriría para, por ejemplo, replicar el modelo en Colombia, Perú o Brasil? Si alguien más quiere, digamos, comentar sobre esto, pensando también y entendiendo que esta especie es indicador de la salud de los ecosistemas de río, además de proveer otros servicios y con la preocupación de la situación que tiene la Amazonía hoy en día, donde además nos hemos fijado mucho en el tema de bosques, pero hemos olvidado el tema al final de la salud del río, que es el que alimenta pues ese gran bioma. Pensando en esa urgencia, quizás Gabriel, si de pronto pudiera como hacer un ejercicio de pensar qué necesitaríamos para...
Yeah. Gracias. I'll take a couple of questions and then we'll go. Super, but that's fantastic. Thank you, Camilo. So I saw two hands somewhere there. So there's, yeah, one there, and was there somebody else still?
Thank you so much. We would want to direct my question to Luciano from Madagascar. As little as I know, Madagascar is one of the most biodiverse hotspots in Africa and indeed globally. You've talked about different policies that are in place to see to it that biodiversity is conserved in Madagascar. My question is, how much are the rural communities, the indigenous people involved in the drawing up of these policies and in their implementation, such that we have a common agreement, even as much as we want to protect biodiversity, that the livelihood of the rural communities and indeed the indigenous communities are not outrightly destroyed? Thank you.
Thank you. Time or space for one more question if there's any, otherwise we'll go to the panel. I don't see any hands up, so I think, Gabriel, you were first, and then Sila.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the question. Let me switch to Spanish. En primer lugar, que haya la voluntad. O sea, lo que necesitamos es si hay una decisión de los países o de instituciones o de sociedad civil o eventualmente privados interesados en hacer una réplica de una intervención de este tipo a nivel de cuenca, o sea, eso se puede llevar adelante. Lo segundo es conseguir recursos, que haya los recursos disponibles para hacer una intervención de este tipo. ¿Hay recursos? Sí los hay. El Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo ha lanzado el año pasado su iniciativa regional amazónica y la Corporación Andina de Fomento está también con una mirada muy fuerte sobre el trabajo en la Amazonía en búsqueda de formas distintas de desarrollo, ¿no? O sea, nuevos modelos de desarrollo que incluyan este tema, donde sí, para lograr que haya una decisión, por ejemplo, de los ministerios de finanzas, que son los que activan los recursos, por ejemplo, que vienen del BID o de la CAF, hay que presentar el caso desde el lado del fin como un indicador de la calidad del río y de cómo eso se conecta con un potencial de crecimiento económico, ¿no? Porque uno de los temas en esta discusión sobre transversalización o mainstreaming es quién raya la cancha, ¿no? ¿Quién es el que, who's the one defining the field where we play, ¿no? Y ese es un gran tema, o sea, ¿con qué indicadores? Y ahí los practitioners de conservación, estamos en relativa desventaja, porque los indicadores que definen, por lo general, una decisión de mainstreaming son los indicadores económicos, son los indicadores, o sea, parte por poder, que yo pueda demostrar o que yo tenga la obligación de demostrar que esta opción es mejor que la opción tradicional. Claro, nosotros no le pedimos a los economistas que entiendan de biología, ¿no? O de endemismos, pero ellos sí nos exigen a nosotros, oye, dame la tasa de retorno, dame los multiplicadores económicos de esa acción que estás tomando, ¿no?
Gracias, Gabriel. Can you pass the mic on to Lucina, please?
Okay, thank you for this relevant question. About the involvement of rural communities and indigenous people to the policies. If I got your question, in Madagascar, as I presented, most of we have extended our protected areas 15 years ago. And most of those protected areas are under the category 5 and 6 of IUCN. It means that local communities should involve more in the process, and also to avoid this kind of exclusivity for the other categories for protected areas, for IUCN categories for protected areas. So even we feel again more complicated to involve more rural communities, because as I said at the beginning of my presentation, that we are still challenging with the level of understanding between local communities and policymakers for different policies. We are trying now to consult more the local communities at different stage of policies implementation process. And for example, on establishing the local marine managed areas, the LMMAs, known with this name, LMMAs. Those LMMAs, for our example, for Conservation International, they serve as our management unit for our marine protected area. So within the marine protected area, local communities have their commitment to manage their own resources, on marine resources. So they are in this stage of strong involvement, but it needs a lot of capacity building, a lot of strengthening their capacity to understand more the policies, the strategies, and mainly the law enforcement. For the involvement of local communities on livelihood activities, as you asked, for Conservation International in particular, we have our approach, conservation agreement. It means that there is a kind of agreement between the local communities and CI for establishing this kind of engagement for the local communities to protect, to restore the natural resources in compensation of the livelihood activity that we are developing with them, and it is not as the kind of giving a small alternative, but to reach at the private sector level, and to look for a market for them to sustain this commitments for the natural resource management. I don't know if I can respond to your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucina. And I'm sure perhaps, if follow-up are needed, they can also be done over the cocktail tonight to celebrate the event. I think we'll call it a close also because, there's still one segment following after us, and to keep people having some energy still until the said cocktail. So I'm not even going to try to summarize all of this, because I think the key point here is that mainstreaming is complex. It's necessary. There are many ways to do that. And I think the best we hope we've been able to do is to make you really think about it. But think about it also, as I said in the very start, mainstreaming and also how to scale up. So both elements are really important. But with that, I would love to thank the panel. So thank you so much. Also, Sunitha, if you're still online, thank you so much for you being there. And of course, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Can I just make one announcement and request?
Absolutely, you can do that.
Because the IAI has scholarshiped 20 Ecuadorians to come to the conference. Entonces, los becarios del IAI se pueden encontrarme a mí y a Andrea aquí fuera. Así que terminé esa sesión. Por favor, quería sacar una fotito. ¿Sí? Dale.
Super. Thank you, Laila. So with that, thank you, the audience, and go and have your photo taken, please, to whom it most. Thank you.
Thank you.